Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you. I know it's the winter, so thrilled to have you on the show. We haven't known each other a long time, but we've recently connected and talked about things going on in the community, share some common connections and an interest in the startup world. So I can't wait for people to hear your story. If you could give us just a little background on your maybe education and experience.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in a real small California town called Los Olivos,
Okay,
which is in Santa Barbara County, which now a lot of people know where Santa Barbara is because
of
it's where the
course.
big Thomas fire was and still is, which is now the biggest wildfire in California history. But that's where I grew up. And so the first school that I went to, actually, my grade school, I graduated in a class of two. So
Wow.
I always tell people I was either number one or number two in my class. I just don't know which one.
Succeeding early on,
Uh,
Brandon.
that's
Succeeding early
right.
on.
But it was out there, and I love to share that story now that I live here in Knoxville in East Tennessee, because I think a lot of people picture California and they picture the Golden Gate Bridge and the Hollywood sign and lots of traffic and big businesses and the beach and so forth. But I grew up in a rural mountainous area, obviously a really small school. We had outhouses, right? So it was like Little House on the Prairie. And for me, that was a great place to go to school. We spent a lot of time, out in nature, learning about our surroundings, and it was
Sure.
very self-guided. So I remember there was another student there that picked up an algebra book and decided to learn algebra. And I saw that, and being a little bit competitive, I was like, well, if they're going to learn algebra, I'm going to learn algebra too.
Right.
And so I just kind of dug into it, and that was fine. That was kind of anticipated and encouraged. So the teachers would say, "That's great. You want to learn algebra? Let us know if you have any questions." But otherwise, you just kind of work your way through the book. So in some respects, that was a little bit of a template, for the entrepreneurial journey, which is that no one can really uh, guide you toward it unless you're pretty interested in it yourself. Is my sense. But if you are interested in it, it's nice to have people around you that are willing to say, "Okay, well, let me know if you have any questions." And that's been a great thing, I think, about building a business here in Knoxville, is that there is a great community of folks like you and the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center and others that are
Right.
kind of cheering you along and that are willing to throw in a helping hand when you need one.
Did you always have entrepreneurial inclinations even early on? I mean, sort of what led you down this path?
I think, interestingly, I don't think I was really one of those kids that was consistently setting up, the proverbial lemonade stand,
Right.
right? Or a lot of the kids like a Warren Buffett that started selling candy at his school and figured out, hey, I'm pretty good at this and I can have a good markup. I wasn't particularly doing that, but I was interested to learn, even over the last several years, there is an entrepreneurial streak that runs through my family. There's a
Okay.
lot of relatives going back to, grandparents and aunts and uncles and stuff that have started their own businesses or been involved in real estate reconstruction and so forth. So I think that that's there, but that's kind of all part of the American dream too, right? You have an idea and see if you can go out and do it. I think that I really started to get into it toward the latter part of high school and especially in college. So this was, late 90s, 95 through 2000s. This was the big dot-com boom, and you
Right.
kind of have to have your head in the sand growing up in California to not know
So
that
you were
something.
still in California during that time?
Yeah, I was going to school at UC Santa Barbara, and you knew something was going on because there were folks that were, IPOing, right, going public with basically an idea,
Right.
maybe a homepage that
Right.
said what they were doing. It was like, what the heck is going on? So that's when I really started to get interested in, okay, how do you start a company? How do companies get financed? How do they go from A to Z? And I started building some, websites with friends and kind of trying to get started in that area. We didn't really get full blown startups off the ground at that point. I wish I would have.
Sure.
Um, you know, Free advice to the extent that I'm willing to offer advice: start early and start often, right? That's one thing I would say. I would like to go back and say, oh yeah, I in college got a .com off the ground, even if it had crashed and burned. That would have been a neat experience. So, but I was kind of hacking away at the periphery but started to get really fascinated about what was possible.
Well, let's stay there for a minute, Brandon. So, what was it that sort of held you back from starting earlier on in your when your interest started to get peaked? Was it just not didn't feel like you had the experience or resources? Was there something holding you back from doing it, or
I think it was mostly just not knowing what I didn't know. So
right,
it wasn't a sense of like, well, I really need to get some more experience before I jump in. It was more of like, where do you even start?
right,
So we kind of started by like, well, shoot, we can build websites for people, and then we started, this is my friends and I started brainstorming ideas for like, hey, what about a company that did whatever? Because
right?
in those days, it was like, hey, if you could register a domain name, you could start a business. And so I remember distinctly one night we really sketched out this idea for, well, we really need to be able to manage identity online, and here's how it would
Oh,
work, and so forth. And then the next day, Microsoft released what they at the time called Microsoft Passport. And we looked at it and we were like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we sketched out. And that's Microsoft. And they're a lot bigger and a lot smarter than
I
we
think we'll
are.
go somewhere else.
Yeah. Maybe we'll brainstorm some other ideas. So that was part of it. Part of it was just, having some ideas, but also realizing there's a lot of other people out hustling and having ideas too, and they're going to launch them. So it wasn't a free for all. There was plenty of greenfield, and there still is, but there's also plenty of good competition out there. And so
Sure.
it's not jumping into every idea that might hit your brain. It's kind of picking and choosing what you want to spend time on.
Yeah, and Brandon, are you of the belief that so competition can go one of two ways? You sort of alluded to it, so I just want to dig a little deeper. There's some people who say obviously too much competition in the saturated market is not a good thing, but then no competition obviously tends to mean there's no demand for a given solution. Is there a sweet spot in your mind, sort of where things like that fall?
It's a great question. A lot of it probably depends on the type of business. I mean, I always go back to the best place to put a gas station is next to another gas station.
Right.
That's why they're all clustered at these intersections. Same thing with fast food. Best place to put your fast food restaurant is next to a McDonald's if you can afford to, because
That's
at least
right.
keep stopping to eat.
Right.
But meanwhile, yeah, too much competition, and we see this as a small company now. Big company moves into our space, that's a big deal. Like that's what we would consider an existential threat if it's big, and we've sort of weathered that over the years and continue to evaluate the market space in that respect. Because while on the one hand we can say, well, this is great market validation, that's the positive spin. The negative spin is, holy cow, they could steamroll us, and that
Absolutely.
happens. That happens for real. We all see that reading the paper where a company has a good run, and they say, well, what the heck happened? Where'd they go? And sometimes it's regulation changed, but sometimes it's someone came into their space and squashed them, right? Microsoft or Google or Amazon came through and decided to take the market, and they run away with it.
Absolutely. I think that can be some of the danger in being what I call the first mouse to the cheese. Sometimes, there's an educational cost into what you're doing, particularly if it's a truly unique idea. And then there's this whole idea of the reasons you have to scale super fast to either outrace that competition that can come in and sort of scoop up market share, or grow so fast that it's just better for them to turn around and buy you instead of trying to do it themselves. So,
Right. Yeah. No, it's the old adage, how can you identify the pioneers in an industry? They're the ones with the arrows in their backs, right?
right.
So it's like they've trailblazed and they've figured out the market a little bit. Someone else has learned from them and maybe leapfrogged them, but then they've also taken some lumps along the way.
That's right.
So we've certainly experienced that. I think our big advantage from day one was that we were the first in our market. And that helped a lot for us, right? We were able to get out to market and pick up early customers. But that isn't a be all and end all. It's not, well, we're first in the market, and so we're always going to be the fastest and the best, and
Sure.
life's going to be great here on after. It enabled us as a small company to get a foothold, establish a beachhead, if you will. But then after that, it wasn't a matter of a couple months before we had competitors in the market, and then it's a sprint.
It's just a sprint, yeah. So let's talk about that. It's a great chance to move into it. So the company Cirrus Insight. So run us through. Most entrepreneurs that I talk to, they remember that origin story. They have that moment where they remember going, "Aha, I have something. I'm going to go after this." Are you the same? Do you have a moment you were like, "I'm going after this opportunity"?
Yeah, and for me, the aha moment largely is creditable to my co-founder, Ryan, who saw the gap between Salesforce which is a customer relationship management platform
Right.
a lot of folks are probably familiar with, and Gmail, which probably every listener has a Gmail account, either for work or personally or both or hundreds of them, right?
Absolutely.
So he saw a gap for especially small business owners that were moving to Gmail or starting off on Gmail, whereas everyone used to use Microsoft Outlook for email.
Absolutely.
So people were starting to move to Gmail, and meanwhile, Salesforce was growing very fast, fastest growing in the CRM segment, and no one had connected or integrated those two platforms. So he started coding, and then he and I have been friends back since those days at UC Santa Barbara. We had
Okay, so you knew each
brainstormed all
other at
these
school.
ideas,
Okay.
and we had always kept in touch. And I had gone on to business school and law school, and he had gone on and worked for IBM and a bunch of other software companies, and really developed a lot of expertise in the Salesforce platform. So in terms of knowing the tech, Ryan's top of the field. And so he said, there's a gap here. I think it's interesting. What do you think? And so I started kind of jumping in and helping out on the business side. Like, is there a market here? What do partners in the Salesforce ecosystem think? Are people interested in trying out our software if and when it's ready? Would customers buy it? So it's kind of a lot of market research and analysis, but frankly, just a lot of being on the phone. And so, yeah, the moment that it hit me that this was exciting was one that Ryan was willing to have the conversation and say, hey, what do you think? Could we build this together? Which was just exciting as a concept.
Right.
Because we'd always tried to kind of sink our teeth into a startup, but all of our ideas end up just kind of being little point in time projects and not self-sustaining organizations. And then the second, really big thing that hit was the feedback that I started hearing from people like, yes, absolutely, we would like to try it. And once they did try it, this is great. It's got a lot of problems. We need you to add a lot of features. Here are the bugs that we've already found. But as it is today, it adds enough value that we would actually buy it.
Wow.
And in fact, we'd be willing to buy it now. And I thought, well, that's pretty neat because one path would be freeware, right? There's tons of great software on the internet that's free. It's brilliant. And all of us use it all day. But then there's also software that people are willing to pay for. And so we saw the opportunity that this could be software that has value and that we could charge for it and build a business behind it.
So it sounds like, which is great for the listeners to understand, a good amount of validation on the front end through some customer conversations that you held and things like that. A nice pairing of partners, maybe one on the technical side, one more on the business side, probably some overlap somewhere in between. And then, I love how you mentioned the customers you were talking to or the prospects you were talking to saying, well, this is great, but it's going to need this, this, and this. And they basically, am I right? Did they sort of lay out the roadmap, the early roadmap for you?
They did. And I would say to the extent that we've done anything right, it's been listening to the customers and basically doing what they're asking us to do.
Right.
Not all the time. So I would say it's fair. We've had a few good ideas along the way that no one else had and that we built into the product or markets that we were able to go into because we thought it was a good idea and it worked out. And we've had plenty of bad ones that didn't work out. But when we've listened closely to what customers just said, we want this, more often than not, that's been the right thing to do. So I would say occasionally customers have come in, oh, we really, really want this. And it turns out to not be correct.
Right.
They're saying they want something, and it turns out once we've spent all the time and energy and money building it, they in fact don't, or they don't use it. They thought they wanted it, and that happens to all of us.
It was a nice to have.
It was a nice to have, or it's just I thought I wanted it, and it's not even nice to have. Like I'm not even going to use it, it turns out. But most of the time, people are pretty good about saying this is a real business need, and if you can solve this for me, I'm willing to pay for it because it will save me a lot of time, make me more productive, solve some other problem that's going to advance my business. So we listened to a lot of that, and that really built out our roadmap, I would say, for the first 6 to 12 months of existence. So that really put a decision to us at the time. Do we go in the tank and build for what we had spec'd out to hit our next major sprint milestone would be 4 months, and then launch to the public? And we had about 1,000 pilot users at the time providing feedback. Or do we launch like right away?
Walk us through that decision.
Yeah, we spent. That was the big, like you say. What was the big moment? That was the big phone call where Ryan and I spent an hour or two on the phone talking about, do we launch like next week or in 4 months? So there wasn't really a happy medium. It was like, well, we either really put our heads down and crank out, fix all the bugs, and get some of these, shiny bells and whistles, the neat features that people want into the app that we thought would be super awesome, or do we listen more to the feedback that said, hey, this is pretty good today. We want all this stuff, but we're also getting value on the pilot. Thanks for including us. And if you charge for it, we'd probably pay for it. Do we launch right away? And so I think, the best decision we made was 6 years ago to say, let's launch. And the reason that was valuable is it did enable us to be first to market and scoop up some of the early customers that were looking to solve their pain like right then. They weren't looking to solve it in 4 months. They were looking to solve it today. And those were our first customers. And they got in with us early. So they were able to influence the roadmap, and they were also able to take some lumps with us, right? If the application went down or a bug caused harm in the software that caused them some downtime, then they were there with us. So they benefited from great pricing, instant access to us, right? And a team of two.
Right.
We're on the phone with them all day. And but it helped us to get that market share. There was another company at the time that had a fully launched website explaining what it is that they did and whatever, but they didn't have the product. So they actually launched the website before they launched the product. So we thought it was in market, and it was only through calling a bunch of people and even calling them directly and just saying, hey, I'm really interested in your product, to find out that they hadn't launched yet. So we were able to get out before they did. And they launched 2-3 months after we did. But in that time, we were able to get some coverage and get out to market and kind of get that mind share that for a team of two, small company, 100% bootstrapped at the time, was very valuable to us.
Absolutely.
6 years ago.
Yeah, it's so interesting that 2 or 3 months of time made that big of a difference for you too, and great for people to sort of pay attention to with their own ideas. When you were making that decision, what pieces of it were more important? And I suspect I know the answer, but I'll just say it. I'm guessing the revenue itself was nice, but it wasn't what was really driving that decision to go ahead. It was more that market share grab. Is that what I'm hearing?
It was, and it was just responding to, okay, we believe these customers that are saying it's good enough, right? So
Not
I think
perfect, but good enough to solve what I need.
far from perfect,
Right.
but with some really important core features. So really the two main features we launched with were, one, you receive an email from somebody and you ask yourself, is this person already a customer or a prospect of mine, or is this someone that's brand new? And what we would do is look in Salesforce and find a match and display it alongside your email inside Gmail. So instead of having to open up a new browser tab, log into your CRM database and search for it, we would just tell you, this person is a customer, this person is a prospect, and here's everything we know about them from Salesforce. Last time you talked to them, open opportunities, there's a ticket, there's a meeting already scheduled in a couple weeks with another member of your team, et cetera. So that kind of instant customer lookup was number one. And number two was the ability to take an email and save it into Salesforce to say, this was a communication I had with this customer. It happened at this date and time. This is what we talked about. And I'm going to save this for the future. So the whole team is on the same page, so that I'll remember it 2 years from now, and so that I can track a deal through time. Those were really the two core features we launched with that worked. And then we had a bunch of others that were in development and a few others that were pretty early that we were still testing out. But those two were enough to get out and get people using the app. And it's very sticky because it's in the inbox.
Right.
So you see it your entire working day, to the extent that your livelihood relies on emails, as many of us in sales it does. You would see it all day. And you would say, well, this is useful to have this little plugin, this little gadget doing work for me so that I don't have to manually do that work. So really our reviews were twofold. End users simply said, I really like this thing. It saves me time, full stop. And they would say it in lots of different ways, but it really boiled down to, this is a time saver. And then managers would come in from time to time and leave a review and say, well, this is great because my team is happier, which makes me happy. Right. But more importantly, there's data flowing into our CRM system, and there didn't used to be. And so I was getting criticized for spending a bunch of money on Salesforce, and no one was using it. And now finally people are using it.
Right.
So I'm not criticized anymore. And I can start running some reports on the data, and I'm starting to see some patterns. And so we're improving the way that we work internally.
Really
So
nice combination of benefits there to make
yeah,
multiple parties happy.
yeah, it's a little return on investment argument. And so
Right.
we were able to leverage kind of the combination. If we're talking with an end user, we would say, your time is valuable and we're going to save some for you. And if we're talking to a manager, we're going to say, man, isn't it hard to get your team to do what you want? Yeah, it is. We're going to help them help you by making it easy for them and saving them time. They will essentially be putting good data into the system that you can use. So everyone's going to be happy.
So I'm curious, Brandon, you launch you go ahead and launch, it's out there, you're seeing some good adoption. There's there a moment that you and Ryan are on the phone going, holy cow, what, this is crazy. What just happened? I mean, where's that moment when you realize I know it sounds like you've got something when they tell you to do it, but I'm curious, was there a moment that you guys are, no, seriously, we've really got something, and now it has to be, foot to the floor to outpace everybody else?
Yeah, I think there were a couple or a few important milestones that jump out. Number one was I was really hustling to launch the first kind of official version of the website, meaning more than one page where we could just sign up for the pilot. I was hustling to launch that website before my son was born. And I knew he was coming, right? It was going to be within the next, several days or a couple weeks. And so I was cranking on that, and I launched it at close to midnight on a day, and then the next day my son was born.
Of course.
And so we got the website up, but before it was officially out, it was kind of in a testing environment in WordPress, and I didn't know enough about the platform, to be honest, to realize that I needed to set the entire thing to no index. Otherwise, Google would pick it up. So Google picked it up early, and one of our early pilot users found the website and put an order in.
Oh,
and Ryan had wired it so that when someone ordered and the money flowed in the system, it would hit the bank account, and we would get a text message that said, money has been deposited in the account of this amount. So we get this text message saying, $60 has come into the account. And we're like, why?
What?
From whom? So on the one hand, it was like, wow, that little system that Ryan, rigged works. That's awesome. And then the second question is, why did it work? And so I called the person. I said, hey, we haven't even started charging for the application yet. I can refund your money. And honestly, you've been an early user that's provided a lot of great feedback. So we were going to let you use the application for several more months before we started charging. And he said, I appreciate the call. That's all good and well, but I'm going to buy it in a couple months anyway. I like it. It's valuable.
Wow.
So I'll be your first customer. So that was a big shot in the arm for us. We thought, well, shoot, maybe this is great. We could have found one really nice person, but maybe there's more of these people out there that once we launch, we can start selling this thing. So that was one. And then two, we did a promo that said, hey, look, if you're one of the first 500 customers to buy, you can get this great rate and you'll be grandfathered for the future. So you'll keep this rate, quote unquote, forever if you want to.
Right.
And here's the deal. And it's going to expire when we reach this many customers. And then we actually exceeded that number of customers. So then we said, well, it's going to expire at this date and time. So as we got close to that time, which was midnight on whatever day that was, about 11:30 that night, an order hit the system. We got a text message, and it was like $4,500.
Oh, man.
Came through. And so then we called each other and was like, what
holy
the heck is
cow.
that? Like, is that real? Was that a real order? And what just happened? And the thing was, it was one of those great examples of using a deadline, because the company had seen it. They didn't have time even to go in and vet it across their whole team. So they had a power user come in, download it, try it. Oh, I like this. And then, well, we only got an hour. We better get the order in. And so they put it through and bought it for however many users on their team it was, 80, 90 users, something like that. And so obviously, yeah, I was in touch with them right away. And hey, thanks for the order, and we'll help onboard you and this and that. But yeah, that was a really interesting one, because there were $60 orders, right? A couple $100 orders, and then all of a sudden $4,500. It's like, oh, $4,500, that's for real. We can pay our hosting bills, and we can keep the lights on, and if there's more of these, that's a real company. And so over the first 6 to 9 months, I think it's fair to say, it was a total roller coaster where
Sure.
we got a few orders like that. We're like, oh, we're on to something now. And then the next day, the next week, maybe the next month, the bottom would fall out. And it's like, oh, maybe those were all the customers.
That's it. We've saturated all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, maybe we're done. So that was great. We got a few customers, and now they're gone. And so it really went up and down in pretty wild swings, but started to be, to get more reliable over time, where it's like, okay, now we kind of get how to pick up some customers, how to keep them, et cetera. And so 9 months in, we did raise some money from angel investors, which in a lot of ways, I mean, it helped us certainly from a financials perspective, but it also gave us that emotional permission to hire people, where we felt honestly pretty uncomfortable doing it because our cash flow was so rocky. To put it plainly, kind of hard to hire somebody and say, we'll pay you this month, but next month is hard to say.
We're not so sure.
Hard to say. Who knows what will happen?
Right.
So we were able to use it to smooth out cash flow. And about 6 months in, I officially left my full-time job at the time and dedicated full-time, which Ryan would tell you, it kind of alarmed him, because then it was like I was all in at that point.
It's time.
And so that encouraged him to also get all in. And so he transitioned his consulting company to a new owner, and then he was all in as well at that point.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that whole story. I think it's important for people to hear because, I mean, some parts of it could sound almost too good to be true. But as you said, in reality, it really was kind of like this. You had some big orders and then some months or time. You're like, oh, my gosh,
right?
What do we do? And then you go on and you raise money. At what point did you move to Knoxville, or do I have that? Was that the next phase?
I was in Maryville at the time. So that's where it started. So Ryan's in Irvine in California, Southern California. And I was here in Maryville. My wife and I moved here from Washington, D.C. About 11 years ago. So she's a professor of sociology at Maryville College.
Okay.
Was
that how you got here?
Yep. That's why we moved here, for her to take that job. And then I worked at Maryville College for about 3 years, and then started Cirrus Insight and did it for the first several months from the house, just, dining room table,
right.
Classic. I would say in the basement, which is where I am today. But at that house, it didn't have a basement. So we just had the dining room table, and it was the work table.
Right.
So that's where the company was. And then a few months in, I decided it'd be helpful to have an out-of-the-house office. So I just got a one-room office down the street, which then, as we added employees over time, became the office where we had about 15 people in and working in the hallways and everything until we outgrew that space. At which point we moved our residence and our office to Knoxville.
Right. Okay, great. So now, so you go on, you raise some capital from investors.
Yeah.
Can you give us a rough idea how big that round was? I mean, just
So it's an interesting story because I think it's a possibly an illustrative example of, a deal's not a deal until it's done. So we had a software company in Southern California that said, we really like what you guys are doing. We'd like to make an investment. Originally, they had said, hey, we'd like to come in and maybe do about 1.5. And we thought, that's really exciting. Like, that's go time. That's real.
That's a bunch of money.
That's a bunch of money. So we put together a big plan, right? We hadn't had a business plan until then. And so we wrote up an executive summary and tried to come up with a good idea for the business plan, and shipped that to them. They said, this looks really promising. Here's how we want to structure it, though. We want to come in at the start for 500. And then, assuming you hit these benchmarks, we'll follow on with the ones. So we're like, okay, so it's not really 1.5.
It's not 1.5. It's staggered, right?
I said, but still, the plan still holds, and it's still a ton of money. And so we thought, well, great. And they said, great. So we essentially had a phone conversation where we felt verbally that was pretty strong. They basically said, great, we'll have our attorneys prepare some paperwork. You can review it, which was really just the start of a process.
Right.
But nevertheless, it sounded like it was trending. The next day, that company was acquired.
Oh, man.
All they're doing, they had a bunch of acquisitions that were pending. They had a bunch of investments that were pending, and all of it got put on hold or shut down by the acquiring company. So that all kind of went away overnight, and we were like, well, shoot. Thankfully, we hadn't relied on money coming in, so we hadn't started spending, which was good because that would have been a tough situation for us. But we did have a nice plan. And so when that fell through, then we got the question from others like, hey, did that deal come through that you mentioned? No, it
No.
actually fell through. Oh, what were the terms of that deal? And we described them. And we had investors say, well, I'll take the terms of that deal. You already did all the work. It's already all planned out. You got the spreadsheets. Let's go. Let's do that.
And
So
you
we
weren't
raised.
pre-revenue at that point. You have, as you told the story, you had
Yeah,
some revenue coming in, and
we had revenue coming in. And so we were able to raise, so we did $500,000 then. And then over the next, I would say 18, 24 months after that, we did another 750. So in total, we did about $1 million a quarter from angel investors. So after that first angel investor, some of the other angels were early customers.
right?
They just said, we really like the application. We want to be part of the story. Can we invest, 25,000 or 50,000? And we're like, well, we're not really running a process, but yes, that would be great. Huge vote of confidence.
Sure.
And every little bit goes a long way in a small company. And so we had a half dozen other folks kind of jump in, and that added up and helped us a lot. Cap table, perspective to have some equity on the sheet and have some cash in the bank.
For sure. So sounds like a combination of some just traditional angel investors, but then also what I might call some strategic partners, almost customers that like what you were doing.
Yeah. Early customers, boosters, right? Customers that had some liquid capital that they wanted to put to work and decided that we were a good place to do that. So, certainly as a company, we want to do right, by our customers and by our employees, but we also want to, hopefully keep growing and have a good outcome for our investors over time, because some of them now have been in for several years.
And most of those dollars probably went toward, I'm guessing, hiring staff and some R&D, new product development, that type stuff.
Yeah. As soon as the first check hit the bank, then we hired our first 4 employees, all of whom were here in Maryville with me, and then Ryan then was able to start adding some tech talent on his side to help him with the coding in the kind of the 6 months following that.
Okay. So if we could, if it's all right, I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of, the whole idea of the podcast is talking to entrepreneurs from the Southern United States, but you guys have this blend here of California and the South.
Yeah.
What have you seen? I know you're active in the startup community here and throughout the South in general. What are you seeing that makes it attractive? We're sort of starting to hear the narrative that it's attractive to do business here, right? We've had articles recently released that say Chattanooga, Knoxville, great cities to start businesses because of cost of living, all those things. Have you seen that? Has that been part of your all's decision? What spurred the thinking was the talking of talent. I know talent is a lot of discussion about finding talent here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for any business, the number one thing, I won't say regardless of cost, but that's paramount to cost is just the quality of the talent, right? Can you find the right people that have the right skills and the right cultural fit for your organization? And for us, we've been very lucky in that respect. I always call it, we've been a good match for a lot of folks. So we're looking for people that want to be part of, for lack of a better phrase, a crazy startup adventure. And that's not, as we've learned, that's not for everybody. There's sure. Folks that we've interviewed that we've been really excited about, like, oh, we really wanted them to join our team. But what they wanted was a lot more structure, a lot more stability. They wanted to look at, hey, what has your company done for the last 15 years? Well, shoot, we've only been here 15 months.
Right.
So we don't have that track record to share. So we weren't the right fit for them. But we were looking for folks that were excited to jump on board, that could essentially be curious, be creative, create their own jobs, be Jack and Jane of all trades, come in and help and do support, and then also do sales, and then also switch and do some other things for the company, right? Help build a website.
Yeah.
So, and what we found is there were a bunch of people looking for that were here, that were graduating from Maryville College, from University of Tennessee, that were out in industry already, but were really looking for that exciting, fast growth technology company experience, that wanted to stay, but otherwise would relocate to other cities, right? The San Franciscos, Austin, Texas,
right.
New York, Chicago, Boston, that have these little tech scenes. And so when we met those people and they met us through one way or another, it was a great match for everybody concerned, because they were happy to find us and we were thrilled to find them here. So we built out what I call our go-to-market team here, sales, marketing, support. Meanwhile, Ryan, who leads product and is the architect of the application, hired on his side in California for programmers.
Got it.
And product developers. So that's really, we have a geographic split that's very much a functional split also.
Yeah, makes sense. You talked about those employees coming on, it being a fit for them, the entrepreneurial life and those type things. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what's been the toughest part of being an entrepreneur and being part of a startup?
I think perhaps my favorite entrepreneurial quote is, an entrepreneur is someone who works 80 hours so they don't have to work 40
for somebody else.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but I think that's certainly something I was looking for. Like, I wanted to be all in on something. So I think the hardest part is also the best part, as is often the case in life. I think the hardest part is that you're doing it all the time. You're thinking about it all the time,
right?
Even if not quote unquote working at your desk, you're trying to figure it out and trying to build a business, trying to keep it afloat, because it's what you do all the time. You don't switch off, you don't turn off the lights and go home from work and then go back into work the next day. Work is with you because you are the work. But that's also the positive.
I was going to say, do you find you thrive in that? It took me a few years to get to that point, to be honest, but I feel like I thrive in that sort of flexibility of schedule to ebb and flow with when I need to turn it off and on.
Yeah, and it's what I was looking for at the time. I wanted to say, well, okay, if I have a lot of energy, then I want to put it into something all the way. And I want to be able to, if I have a sales idea, then try to execute on it. And if I have the marketing idea, then try to do that. And so, part of the best thing about running a startup is you get to be very diverse about it.
Right.
You can't just be really good, I don't think, at one single thing. You got to kind of be okay at, or hopefully pretty decent at, a lot of things, and then maybe really good at one or two things. But I enjoy that. It's a little bit schizophrenic at times. What am I doing today?
Right.
I don't know. A little bit of support, a little bit of marketing, some sales if I have time. And early on, there were choices to make. So, sometimes Ryan would say, well, how were sales today? And I say, I don't know. I did support all day. And then the next day I would just do sales, and the folks wanting support would have to wait, a little bit longer than maybe they wanted to, because It was just me. Then later we were able to add team members to help out and kind of specialize in certain roles. But I think it's fun to try to develop and flex, muscles in different areas of the company and help it grow.
Do you feel like you had those inclinations in your professional life before you did this, and that maybe you've grown into it? How do you see that? Has it always been this way for you, liking that sort of ebb and flow or diversification?
Yeah, it's what I was looking for,
right.
And I think part of that was because I knew that I liked it, or that I thought I would like it.
Okay.
But, I don't know if we ever really know until we jump in. Sometimes we think we like.
That's kind of where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't like as much as I thought. But I think, at least in my case, I'm relatively self-conscious or self-aware. So it's fair to say for me, you make it up as you go. I don't. I think for people, if they were giving a talk and saying like, well, I just really knew that I was great at this and I knew that I could build a company, I'd say that's incredible.
Good for you.
But yeah, that's not been the case.
Right.
For us. We're making it up now, right? We're 6 years in. We feel like we're still very early. We're learning basic stuff every day. Sometimes we launch something and why didn't we have that on day one? Not because it's like it wasn't complicated, but just because like it's so obvious for our business. How did we even make it without that? And it's like, well, I'm glad at least we have it now.
Right.
Finally woke up to the fact that we needed to do that, or that there was an opportunity there. And that's still the case, which makes it kind of fun too, because, on the one hand, it's kind of frustrating because it's like, gosh, aren't we smarter than this? Can't we work harder and faster than this? But on the other hand, it's good because it shows that it's still so early and there's still so much to do.
Yeah, there is, but you guys are obviously doing something right, because you've had some good announcements. If I could just tag on those for a minute. So I believe maybe a recent acquisition / merger. Do I have that right?
Yeah, we bought a really neat company. They were based in Sweden. which made the process of doing the acquisition a learning experience. I think
bet.
doing any acquisition is a big process, but certainly when half the documents that come over are in Swedish, which we don't speak, it makes it a
Strangely
process.
enough, right?
Yeah, but they have really cool tech that it basically, all of us throw attachments on the email all the time. But did the person open the attachment? Did they even see it? Did they engage with it? Who knows? So this is a platform that enables you to take PDFs and PowerPoint slide decks and Word documents, proposals, contracts, etc., and put them up in a document repository, very similar to a Box or Google Drive, etc.
Okay.
But then you can get a link, put it into the email, and when someone clicks that link to open up the attachment, so to speak, then you can see, oh, hey, I just got an alert. Jonathan just opened the proposal. And then I can actually watch in real time as you view the proposal,
Oh,
which is kind of cool.
How amazing.
Yeah, so you're like, oh, Jonathan's on page 5 of the proposal. And
he's been there a while. Something's wrong.
Yeah, right. He's confused or he really likes it. I'm not sure which one. Maybe I'll send an email to follow up. Maybe I'll call him and find out what's going on. So it provides you a lot of good details on what's happening with your documents after you send them out. You can also edit them without recalling them, right? Once you've sent an attachment, it's gone.
Right.
But if you decided, whoops, I sent the wrong thing, then you change the link, right? Change the file that's there. The person sees a different file now. So it's helpful for document management, control, and then sharing across teams.
Were you looking for a solution like that, or did you just happen to bump into them through networking? How did that come to be?
Yeah, I was looking.
Okay.
We had spec'd out and started building aspects of that functionality to build into our platform because it aligned with other things that we do already. So we do email open tracking already. And we help people schedule meetings through email already and do these kind of other, productivity power tools for the inbox,
right.
To use a catchphrase. But we felt like that aspect, being able to track the attachments, was something that was missing, that we wanted to build, that we partially built, but decided if there was an opportunity to pick up a company that had done it already, got in the market, that had a really solid product that then we could integrate in, that would enable us just to go faster. And speed's important right now. There's like thousands of sales enablement applications out in the space now. And so differentiating ourselves and our goal there is to basically be an all-in-one sales stack, if you will. So rather than having to cobble together 5 or 6 different applications and try to make them work together, we want to be that one-stop shop where organizations and freelancers can say, I use this one tool to help me save time, get stuff done, and make sales. And then it pipes into a database or not, depending if they use one or not. That's kind of a good mission for us as a company. So this acquisition, the company's called Attach, or at attach.io, filled that really important gap in our stack and made for a really compelling acquisition. So we did that, in November, just a month ago.
Yeah, not too long ago. So in that instance, you decided to make an acquisition or / merger, or however you want to phrase it. But you also released a new product recently, I think, as a calendar management. Did I have that right as well?
Yeah, we did. And interestingly, that one was as a result, in part, of an acquisition we did several years ago.
Oh, okay.
A tool that enables you to embed your availability into an email, so that the recipient can simply click a time and schedule a meeting with you, and it automatically shows up on your calendar and their calendar. And that came about because someone sent me an invitation that way once, and I thought this was awesome.
Yeah.
Like I booked a meeting with them without even replying to the email.
Exactly.
And so I thought it was great as a recipient because I felt it respected my time. And then I realized like how happy they must be. They didn't even have to have a back and forth conversation with me, and they got the meeting they wanted. So I said, well, I want to get meetings that way. So we started using it on the sales team, and that's how we started to book a lot of demos. And I thought, well, this is great. And so I reached out to one of the company that I had received the invite from and said, hey, where are you guys with product? And as it turned out, it was great timing for them to make a transition. So we picked that up, we integrated it into the app, and then as we built onto that, we now allow you to put a calendar online. It doesn't show all your appointments because it's private information, but it shows when you're free and when you're busy.
Right.
And people can go grab times with you that automatically schedules. So it's a nice way to make yourself really available to prospects and customers. I would say, make it easy for people to book time with you, and sales will be typically the natural result.
And the name of that solution?
So that's part of Cirrus Insight.
I see.
The company that we acquired at the time was called Assistant.to.to is the main name. So they still have a free kind of basic scheduling tool for Gmail. And then as we built it into Cirrus Insight, we added a lot of functionality to it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I think there's a lot of good lessons in there for entrepreneurs and stuff to learn from.
Oh, I hope a few nuggets. If you're like me, if you go to a conference or listen to a show or podcast, if you could find one or two things in there that you think, oh, that's interesting, maybe we should launch early and ask questions later, right?
There it is.
Or not be afraid to pick up a couple early investors in order to hire a team to support the effort and grow bigger. Then great, and hopefully it's useful. And people can hit me up anytime on LinkedIn or through the website. It's I'm easy to find in Knoxville or certainly in the region.
Okay. I will be sure to link to everything. So the best place to get in touch with you is through the Cirrus Insight website, correct?
Yeah. You can email me, Brandon@cirrusinsight.com. Certainly on LinkedIn, a lot of people will reach out that way, which I think is a pretty effective channel these days.
Right.
And then, we'll actually be moving offices to a bit closer to downtown in the new year, probably around February timeline. So once we do that, we'll make an announcement and hopefully do an open house and have a bunch of people over the office.
A lot going on.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jonathan. You bet.